Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot, and today we are going to take a look at yet another update to the Fly-by-Wire mod. It's specifically the rotate law that has been added to the custom experimental Fly-by-Wire flight control system, but which has been a big project by the team to upgrade the sort of handling and flight characteristics. I have a previous video where I talk about my initial reactions to their custom fly-by-wire system, and now they've improved it yet again by adding rotate law. So we're going to talk about what is rotate law, how does it affect us, and how do we use it as pilots. I'll be using the latest experimental fly-by-wire version of the mod for this video. As ever, I am a real-world Airbus pilot, but none of this is for any real-world use. It's just to give you some extra context on your home simulations. To keep mixing up the scenery, we are here today in Christchurch, New Zealand, where we are pretty much set for takeoff, which is where the rotate law will affect us. Let's go and take a look at what it means. Rotate law, or rotate mode as it's otherwise known, is a new feature in the A320neo and A321neo aircraft, and I believe the A319neo as well. It replaces how we previously used to take off. When we are on the ground in the A320 family of aircraft, we are in a version of direct law. Our side stick directly controls the flight control surfaces, and in the older aircraft, the non-neo aircraft, the CEO, we would use that system to get airborne. So we would directly control the elevator as we rotated the aircraft on takeoff to get it into the air. As a result, different weights and different flap settings, and even different density altitudes and temperatures and all sorts of other things, we could find that the airplane handled differently, a particular one being, for example, the CG, if your CG trim was set wrong. The result was every takeoff felt slightly different. The new rotate law means that when we rotate the aircraft and it activates above 70 knots through to 10 seconds after liftoff, when we're in this law, as we pull back on the side stick, we are commanding a rotation rate from the aeroplane. So we no longer have to adjust it. It will always be the same side stick angle to command the desired 3 degree a second rotation rate from the aircraft. This will be the same in any of the conditions described. Here we are on the flight deck now then, ready for our takeoff. This will be a flap 1 plus F takeoff, and as we can see in the FMGC on the fuel prediction page, the CG is 21.7, which is slightly further forward than some other days. As a result, if we go to this view, we can see that I've had to set the trim to 21.7 somewhere here, which is giving us a slight trimmable horizontal stabilizer in the up position to try and counteract that. But as we'll soon find out, that is all less relevant. Obviously we still do it, but it is less relevant in the neo aircraft because they are designed to handle the same way every time thanks to this rotate law. If we look on our PFD up here and our ECAM status display, which is going to show us our flight control movements, even better if I press flight control now, we can see the direct relationship between me moving the side stick. This little cross here shows my side stick inputs, that's all it shows. So if I put that there to the halfway across, we can see the controls move accordingly. Once we are in flight, as I showed in my previous video, and I have plenty of videos about it, so I'll provide a link to those. Once we are in flight, it will convert into normal law, where we are controlling a roll rate and a G-force. We are not directly controlling the flight controls, but on the ground, we are directly moving them, as previously mentioned. In the older generation of aircraft, we would therefore, on takeoff, be directly commanding the elevator for the takeoff as we try to rotate the aircraft up to 3 degrees a second, pitching up to our takeoff pitch somewhere around 15, 17.5 degrees, something like that. However, in the neo aircraft, that is different. As we go to rotate the aircraft, we are simply asking for a rotation rate from the aircraft. So if I move my side stick to here, I'm asking for, let's say, 1 degree a second. I'm not sure exactly what it is, we'll see. And if I move it a bit more, 3 degrees a second, a bit more, 5 degrees a second, something like that. So the difference is, instead of it feeling slightly different or needing a bit more or a bit less of a pull, depending on the CG and the weight and the atmosphere outside and how thin or thick the air is, things like that, this time you simply will always move it to exactly the same position for every takeoff, regardless of the CG, because the Airbus itself is going to do all the calculations and move those elevators to what it thinks you need to move them to get that rotation rate. So the trick is to set it to 3 degrees a second, How do we judge that? Well, at first you may need to use a little bit of the PFD, but in the real aircraft you would never be looking in for the rotation. You look out to the end of the runway and you learn to judge it so that it takes you about those 5 seconds to pitch that nose up to roughly 15 degrees. So we're going to simply have to do a little bit of practice to find out where that setting is on your particular joystick setup at home, but in the real aircraft we can thankfully just look outside and use our previous experience of the rotation rate we're used to make sure that we're getting that right. In the old aircraft as well, as the pitch passed through 10 degrees, it would hang a little bit. We had to do a bit of a squeeze to hold it there, and then as we got into flight you'd have to actually hold that side stick even when the pitch reached what you wanted. You have to hold it in slightly and gradually release it whilst the normal law blended in. That no longer happens. Now, as I said, we're going to hold the pitch, hold the side stick to keep that rotation rate until we reach our desired pitch, and then we release it promptly. We don't need to keep holding it because the airplane will immediately be stopping that rotation, and then it will hold itself there and convert itself into the normal law that we talk about in other videos, which has also been slightly updated in this mod. And I noticed as well, I see it as an iPad has appeared. I don't know what it does yet, but very exciting to see this stuff already coming. So that's it really for us as pilots. The rotation law means don't pull back too much. So pull back, hold it there all the way through, and then release again when it reaches the pitch. That's the change for us. There is also a tail bumper, an electronic tail bumper designed to stop us tail striking. If we were to pull back too fast at too low of a speed, there is a risk of a tail strike. With the tail bumper, the Airbus should stop that happening by reducing that rotation rate if it thinks that we have a risk of striking the tail. This feature is not very well described. I don't have much information on it, so I'll be curious to see how this works out in the simulator. But what I can say is it works up to 2/3 of the side stick pullback. If I pull back fully, we override the tail bumper, so we can still get full control out of the elevators if we need it, because it's also applicable on landing. So this rotation law activates, as we said earlier, after 70 knots and up to 10 seconds after takeoff, by which point you should be at your desired pitch, and then it blends into normal law. We're going to pull back the side stick to get 3 degrees a second and then just hold it there all the way through. I think this will be a big improvement over what we saw before, which was just too much sensitivity in the rotation, quite common in the default A320 and Microsoft Flight Simulator. So for this takeoff, we'll also have the PFD showing. Let's start our timer, release that parking brake, and let's get ourselves taking off. So half side stick forward, all exactly as before, 50% N1, and release those brakes. Now we'll go to takeoff thrust, man flex 68, SRS runway, order thrust is blue and armed. So no changes here. Remember, this new law is not active until above 70 knots, but it still makes no difference to us. As we go through 80 knots, let's release that side stick to neutral. There we go. Looking out, normal rotation, V1, rotate, and then just holding that side stick, and up it goes. Up to 15 degrees, positive climb, gear up, and now adjusting to those flight directors, but I've already released that side stick pressure. So all I did there was one continuous maneuver on the side stick. Very simple to do, much better than before. It's a huge improvement. I did use this on a previous stream and it made such a difference there. Put that autopilot on, thrust levers back one step, thrust climb, autopilot 1 and auto thrust. Away we go. So yeah, huge improvement on the previous rotation in the fly-by-wire mod as well as the default A320, and now it really does behave much more like the Neo aircraft. Such a great improvement to see that now we can finally get those smoother rotations out of the aircraft. So let's go for another takeoff just to see how it feels in a different flap setting. It should feel exactly the same. Whereas in the older aircraft there was a slight difference to the rotation. You could sometimes need a bit more of a pull if you had more flaps. But we are now flap 3, so let's load that into the FMGC for a flap 3 takeoff, flex 65, so same thrust, and we'll see these slightly lower speeds here. Okay, excellent. And we're going to go and see if it handles the same. Now I want to try and show the side stick so you can just see it in the bottom left of the screen. Let's see if I can keep the airplane straight on the runway whilst doing it like this. So we'll start the timer, hold it on the toe brakes, release the parking brake. Oh no, that's not right, didn't mean to do that. Okay, right, 50% N1, there we go. Half side stick forward, release the brakes, 2 clicks forward. Man flex 65 SRS runway, order thrust is armed and blue. Now again, you should never be looking down like this for the takeoff. You should be looking out at the end of the runway. That's how we keep the airplane straight in real life, and that's how you'll have a better chance of a decent rotation. Okay, 80 to 100 knots, bring that side stick to neutral. And remember we are at different flap setting. There we go, V1 and rotate, holding it there, just holding it there, and up it goes, and there's 15, let go, and it holds it there. Magic, just like that, just like the real aircraft. Positive climb, gear up. Amazing, such an improvement. I really am really impressed with that. So as you saw, let's get that all pilot in. Just pulling back on the side stick, holding it there, it's all you need to do, and then releasing it when it gets to your pitch. It's so easy. It is like, well, it is quite literally like a computer game at this point, isn't it? It's amazing. So for demonstration purposes, I want to show you what the older aircraft behave like on takeoff. For those of you who haven't seen the older engines and therefore aren't familiar with what the Airbus has always been like for the past 30 years, this is obviously the IAE engine on the Toliss A32NX plane 11. I appreciate it's an A321, but it's the older generation, the CEO, so the rotation technique is the same as the 320. Just you know, it's just a slightly bigger aeroplane. So let's jump into the flight deck, and do please excuse my very bright in-house livery. We are in the same place in New Zealand, taking off from Christchurch 02. This time, as you can see, we are flap 1 again, flexing 41, so slightly more thrust because the 321 uses more thrust for takeoff, of course, and our rotation speeds are here. Now, I should be able to show you the takeoff and then do a replay to show you the side stick input, but I'll bring up the PFD as before. I'm just going to move it over to the right hand side, and we will go for our takeoff, and we'll see the differences. Most importantly, what you're going to notice is to rotate, I'm going to have direct control over the flight controls all throughout the rotation. So I'll need to pull back and then adjust that as we rotate. In particular, as the nose goes through 10 degrees of pitch, I'll have to do a bit of an extra squeeze. This is an excellent piece of modelling by Toliss. It is completely accurate to the real aeroplane, where on takeoff in these older aircraft, as the tailplane gets close to the ground, there's a slight reduction in the ability for it to produce the rotation effect. So you have to squeeze slightly more on the elevators. It enters the ground effect when it gets near to the ground during the rotation. And it's amazing to see that modelled here. So I'm going to hold it on the toe brakes. We're going to release our parking brake and start the timer. And let's do the same again. So half side stick forwards. Try and keep the side stick in view for you guys. Release those brakes. 2 kicks forward. Manflex 41 SRS runway. Order thrust is blue and armed. And away we go. I much prefer the rudder handling in the Toliss. I still think Microsoft Flight Simulator in general has too grippy friction for the tyres on the ground. Right, 100 knots, side stick to neutral. And here we go then. There's V1 and rotate. So pulling back, and then you'll see we get to 10 degrees. It lags, I have to pull back a bit more to keep that nose coming up. And there we go, we're through that. I'm having to hold pressure, and now I can release it. Now it's blended into a normal law. Positive climb, gear comes up, and away we go, meeting those flight directors. So, a slightly different technique needed in the older aircraft, and it's great to see the differences being modelled in these simulators. Something I want to test now is the FlyByWire. Have updated the control laws to make sure we can get a bit more flight control authority. As we saw in my previous video, we could only get to plus 2G and 0G, which when clean isn't right. We should be able to get to plus 2.5 and down to minus 1. So I'm going to give that a bit of a test just as a bit of a bonus for today. So let's take out that autopilot, let's turn off the flight directors. I'll leave the auto thrust on, leave it targeting 250 knots. We'll put the bird on, why not? Right, let's go. So full backstick up, I'm expecting to see 2.5 G. As we can see down here, there it goes, 2.5 up until we reach our pitch limit of 30. And if I put full side stick forwards, I'm expecting to go to -1. There we go, much better. Much more like I would expect, down to the lower pitch limit of -15. So again, amazing progress by these guys to have this implemented. Really impressed. Pitch up, there we go, 2.4. Very good. And that is how the real aircraft behaves. It's a key part of the Airbus fly-by-wire system that we can get full authority out of the aeroplane when we need it. The reason Airbus has this system is so that if we need to do, for example, a GPWS escape maneuver where we would go full toga thrust and full backstick, we have no concern over overstressing the aeroplane. We can guarantee that when I pull back on that side stick fully, I will get the maximum permitted performance out of the aeroplane immediately with no risk of overstressing the aeroplane. And it's important that we have that available to us, and it's great to see. And as I said before, the fly-by-wire team are the first that I've seen to show this G counter in quite the way. So let's just show you again here. So now I can show you with the side stick. So we'll go full side stick down and you'll see the G counter appear on the bottom of this page. There we go, -1 down to -15. And let's go full back stick up, expecting 2.5. There it is, 2.4. So really impressed with that. Great to see that get updated so quickly. Obviously, flying like this would not be pleasant, and it's important to remember that reversing controls from maximum deflection, even if the airplane is certified to do it, is not a good idea. So going from full back to full aft, to full forward and then to full back again is not ideal, even if the airplane is certified. That's it then for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been interesting for you. Yet another of these details being added to this mod, which is just so great to see. It's really coming along nicely, and the handling now is such an improvement over what we had just a couple of weeks ago. I'm really impressed. The rotation law is something that when you fly a 320neo, you do probably talk about it most times you fly the 320neo, just to remind yourself it's there, because it is different to the older generation aircraft. And it's great to see it implemented so nicely in this mod. As ever, there'll be plenty more streams, videos and tutorials coming on the channel, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see more of those. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again in another video or stream soon. Bye bye.